It's funny how the mind works when you see something or someone familiar. I had just left a store on Main Street when something caught my eye. I looked, then looked again. No, it couldn't be. No, my eyes were deceiving me. There was Rebecca standing on the other side of the street. But no, it couldn't be her. It was a young woman who looked exactly like Becky did 20-odd years ago. Memories of our first meeting at a party when we were 17 came flooding back. God, it was strange. This young lady was her exact copy. Suddenly I realized that I was staring at the girl. I believed she had noticed me at about the same time, and my attention seemed to make her feel uncomfortable. She turned away and pretended to look at a shop window. I could see her watching me cautiously in the reflection of the window. I couldn't take my eyes off her, her whole posture. Everything about her was like my Rebecca. Finally, I came to my senses and turned away. It couldn't be Becky. It was just my imagination. I walked down the street, looking back from time to time. Yes, she was still there, and every time I looked, I saw Becky. I felt very awkward and a little melancholic. By the time I reached the Stag Inn pub, I definitely felt like a pint. I went in, ordered a pint, and then chose a quiet table in the corner where I hoped I wouldn't be disturbed. Then my thoughts turned to happier times. I first met Rebecca at a party when I was 17. She caught my eye as soon as she walked into the room. She wasn't a stunning beauty or anything like that, but there was something about her that attracted me from the start. She was with one of the usual pretty boys, at least he thought so. He had his mother's car and believed he was God's gift to women. You know the type, always bragging about who they've knocked off their feet. Personally, I've always believed that guys who constantly talk about how they've managed to get girls into bed probably suffer from an inferiority complex or something like that, and are most likely not as successful as they'd like to be. I always preferred to keep my thoughts to myself. There's no point in getting a bad reputation. If girls heard guys talking about who they slept with, they knew that dating them would be bad for their reputation. It was important that girls talked about you, and if you were lucky, they would say how nice and reliable you were. If you played your cards right, you could boast about your results. Up until that point in my life, that was my philosophy, and it worked perfectly. Something in Becky's body language told me she wasn't thrilled about her date. As they danced to slow songs, she seemed to be trying to push him away. To be honest, he was trying to get close to her, and she was wriggling to prevent him from achieving his goal. Okay, maybe little things make little people happy. But I found it all very amusing, so much so that I didn't pursue her myself, if you know what I mean. Well, maybe I decided I'd try to steal Becky away from this guy, but I don't think it was a conscious decision at the time. But Prick went a little overboard, which was stupid if you're going to drive later. She didn't look stupid, so I had a chance. Anyway, around 11, Becky went to the bathroom. Instinctively, I seized the moment, and by the time he came back, Becky and I were already dancing. He tried to intervene, but I didn't give him a chance, and at the time, I had a reputation as a guy who was best left alone. I don't really understand how I earned that reputation, maybe because I never got into fights. I wasn't sure I could win, and there were always guys who could back me up. Her boyfriend left and mingled with his friends, glaring at me. Becky explained that she had come on a blind date with a friend. She said that if she had known who her date was, she wouldn't have come. She was worried about how she was going to get home because her date had already been drinking and was known for his violent temper. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay, Rebecca, if you're really that worried, we have a van if you want to ride. We're leaving around midnight. It'll be a little cramped, but I promise you'll get home safe and sound. Alan, our driver, doesn't drink. He's allergic to alcohol or something. One drink, and he's out. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I think I'll take you up on your offer. But I'd better get back to him. He seems nervous, she replied. Feeling pleased with myself, I quickly went around to my close friends to tell them about my plans and make sure everyone agreed to leave at 1 in the morning. Alan, as usual, was buried under Angela, the second love of his life. The first was his old Thames trader van. I simply said, 1 o'clock, everything's fine. And a hand popped out from under Angela's skirt and gave me a thumbs up. God forbid they should interrupt their kiss to talk to me. At 1 o'clock, everyone was in the van. Alan was driving, and Angela was sort of half sitting on the hood, half hugging Alan. How he could drive with her hugging him, I never understood. But when I was with them, he never had an accident. The rest of us sat in the back as best we could, and I was in the passenger seat. Becky ran out of the party with a big smile on her face, jumped into the van, and sat on my lap. To be honest, she wasn't as careful as I would have liked when she jumped in, and I raised my voice a couple of octaves for a few minutes. "What did he say when you told him we were giving you a ride home?" I asked. "I didn't tell him. He thinks I'm in the bathroom. I wonder how long it will be before he realizes I'm not coming back." We all laughed when Alan started the car. The drive home was long and winding. We had to drop off all the girls and guys, and of course there was the obligatory kissing session and arrangements for future dates. Then we had to drive the guy home. So it was already past 3 when we finally arrived at Rebecca's house. She was worried because the lights were on in the house and she believed her parents were still waiting for her and would be upset. I've always believed that if you're willing to take the bull by the horns, you can sometimes work miracles. Asking the 2As to wait for me, I took Rebecca by the hand and walked to the front door. The door swung open before we reached it, and standing before us was a mountain of muscle who appeared to be Rebecca's father. I quickly switched from little rascal mode to young gentleman mode. "Good evening, sir. I'm sorry I brought Rebecca home so late, but the guy she was out with today was a bit much. I thought she'd be safer coming home with us, since my friend who's driving doesn't drink. I'm sorry, but we had someone else to drop off. If I had known you were waiting, I would have asked Rebecca to call you. I apologize. Good night, sir." I believed I had caught him off guard. Becky later told me that her other boyfriends who drove her home late usually ran away when they saw her father. He simply thanked me and wished me a good night. I said goodbye to Becky, turned around, and drove away. Of course, there was a small problem. I didn't have Becky's phone number, but that was easy to fix. The important thing was the first impression I had made on her father. The next day, I knocked on her door with 2 bouquets of flowers, one for Becky and one for her mother, whom I had seen hiding in the shadows the night before. Becky's mother opened the door. I gave her the bouquet and apologized for bringing Becky home so late the night before. There are times when you have to get down on your knees. Then I asked if I could talk to Rebecca. Becky and I went for a walk in the local park, and in the evening we went bowling together. That's how our romance began, and we quickly became inseparable. 3 months later, we slept together. My family was away for the weekend, and we spent an unforgettable Saturday in my bedroom. No quickie. We made love, and after that, we got into the habit of having sex 2 or 3 times a week. I was crazy about Becky, but for some reason, we decided to wait 3 years before getting married. I don't believe either of us was in a rush to get married. We were just having a good time. The problem with sitting alone in a bar reminiscing about the good old days is that you remember the bad times too. At Christmas, after Becky and I got engaged, we started having problems. It was probably my fault. We were at a Christmas party and everyone was kissing under the mistletoe. Some guy was kissing Becky. It seemed like he'd kissed her 3 or 4 times, and I decided they were getting too carried away. That made me tell Becky that I thought it was enough. We were both a little drunk, and she told me not to be so stupid and jealous. Well, that led to our first real fight. A couple of days later, things calmed down, but now, looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the end of our relationship. After that, we fought about every 2 weeks. It was always over silly things, and I believe we both became too jealous and controlling. We would lose our temper for no apparent reason. We definitely loved each other. And if we had gotten married, I'm sure many of the arguments wouldn't have happened. Looking back, I realized that we had been together for so long, and the lack of a final commitment made us both feel a little insecure. and then we had a big fight. I don't remember what started it, but it ended with Rebecca throwing my engagement ring at me and walking out. As it turned out, we never saw each other again. I spent the first week at home waiting for her to call and apologize. According to our friends, Becky was doing the same, but then fate intervened and dealt us a fatal blow. My older brother and his wife, who had emigrated to Australia a few years earlier, were in a serious car accident. My sister and I immediately flew out there to take care of the children and their affairs. Only later did I realize that I should have sorted things out with Becky before I left, but hindsight is always easy. Looking back, you can always see your mistakes. A couple of letters from Becky could have changed our whole lives. I returned to England 8 months later. Soon I heard rumors that Becky had gotten pregnant by some guy, they got married and moved up north. Her friends told me she was very upset when she found out I had gone to Australia. Everyone, including Becky, believed that I had emigrated there permanently and had no intention of returning. I never understood why this happened, because all my friends knew why I had gone to Australia. Perhaps someone had their eye on Becky and spread the rumors. Becky probably decided that I had dumped her and started dating lots of other guys. Her best friend Julia told me that Becky was looking for a replacement for me and had become quite promiscuous in the process. Apparently, she had gained a reputation as a girl who would sleep with anyone. But that wasn't the Becky I knew, although, on the other hand, she did get pregnant. After I found out Becky had left, I didn't go on any dates. I seemed to have lost interest in girls. I spent most of my free time at the pool hall or bowling. No, it's not a game for old men. I admit that most of the players there are older than me, but it's a very enjoyable and relaxing pastime, although I believed I was much better with a cue in one hand and a pint in the other. A couple of pints and a snooker table are heaven. When I was 25, I met a girl named Sheila at work, and we became good friends. She was a year older than me, married, and already divorced. Looking back, I believe I should have been a little more skeptical when she started actively pursuing me. But a year later, we got married, although I don't think I loved her as much as I loved Becky. I loved her very much. We quickly had 2 beautiful daughters, and by the age of 32, I was a happy married father and the owner of a nice little house. We named our daughters Anna Otterly Garner and Carol Otterly Garner. Why Otterly? I just liked the name. I always wanted a daughter with that last name, but Sheila wasn't thrilled with the idea. But in the end, I registered their births myself, so I quietly added the surname to both of them. It's funny that Sheila didn't like the surname Otterly, because Rebecca always looked down on it, too. I guess it was one of the silly things we argued about in the last few months. Things went pretty well for a few years. Becky entered the world of my dreams. Sometimes I had very vivid dreams in which I was married to Becky instead of Sheila. We would walk in the park where we had our first date, or she would push Anna on the swings while I pushed Carol. But then the insidious hand of fate struck me again. A good friend told me that Sheila was cheating on me. You'll never believe it, but it turned out that she had been having an affair with her first husband. Her ex, who is now her husband again, usually stays away from me since I sent him to the hospital for a little vacation. It all happened very quickly. From the moment my friend winked at me to the moment I was a bachelor again, only 6 months had passed. After the divorce, Sheila asked for a meeting, and they came to my lawyer's office together. They both apologized for what had happened and said they wouldn't ask for alimony, but they added that all the money I gave Sheila would go to the children's accounts. Oh, and they dropped the assault charges. They said they wanted me to be involved in the children's lives and promised I could see them whenever I wanted or whenever the children wanted to see me. Sometimes things weren't as good as they seem. One night, Carol had a nightmare, and at 3 in the morning I was called to her bedside. Yes, if you're wondering, it turned out that the children were mine. I had it checked, but I don't believe it would have made any difference to me. I loved those little rascals. I took them with me every weekend, And I'm happy to say that for a long time, Sheila and I were quite friendly and polite to each other when we saw each other. It turned out that Sheila's ex-husband was infertile, so she divorced him. Sheila clearly loved him more than she ever loved me. As soon as she had the girls, I became unnecessary to her, and she went back to him. You know, Sheila even had the nerve to ask me to get her pregnant again because she wanted more children. Well, to each their own. I got myself a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was nice and the kids could come visit me. For the next year or so, life settled into a quiet routine. I had the girls on weekends, and Sheila and that jerk took them during the week. The girls never said anything was wrong, but toward the end, I noticed that Sheila wasn't coming out to meet me when I picked up the kids. I would pull up to the house and the girls would run out with their weekend bags. I noticed that they were always wearing clothes I had bought them on our weekend shopping trips. I just believed they were wearing them to make me happy.